Welcome to another episode where we break down how marketing, content, and technology are evolving in real time. I'm Abeer Aulakh, Director of Marketing and Communications at DiGGrowth. Today, we're talking about a shift that's easy to miss but extremely important. The idea that in a world where everyone can scale content, what really differentiates brands is whether they still sound like themselves while doing it. For a long time, growth meant more campaigns, more channels, more output. But now that AI has made execution faster and cheaper, that definition is starting to change. What we're seeing now is that scale is no longer the advantage it used to be. Almost every team can produce content quickly, launch campaigns faster, and test ideas at a pace that wasn't possible earlier. The real question has shifted from how fast can you move to what do you sound like when you move at that speed? To explore this shift in depth, I'm joined by Akanksha Das, Director of Marketing and Communications at Growth Natives. Akanksha has been working closely with teams navigating AI driven content systems, helping them scale output without losing their brand identity or clarity.
Thanks, Abeer. This is a really interesting moment because the challenge we're facing today isn't about capability, it's about control. We have the tools to do more than ever before, but the real question is whether we're doing it in a way that still feels intentional and aligned.
Let's start there. For years, scale was considered the biggest competitive advantage. What changed that?
What changed is that scale is no longer scarce. With AI and automation, most teams can now produce content, launch campaigns, and run experiments at a much faster pace. So the ability to move quickly doesn't set you apart anymore. It's expected. And when something becomes expected, it stops being a differentiator. That's where the shift happens. Now, what actually matters is how your brand shows up across all that output, whether it feels consistent, recognizable, and intentional.
So the advantage is no longer in doing more, but in doing it in a way that's distinct.
Exactly. And that distinction is what most teams are struggling to maintain as they scale.
As teams started scaling content, what kind of issues began to surface?
The biggest issue is a gradual loss of coherence. When output increases rapidly, it becomes harder to maintain a consistent voice across channels. You start seeing small variations. Emails sound slightly different from web pages. Social posts feel disconnected from broader messaging. Individually, each piece might look fine, but collectively, the brand starts to feel less unified.
So it's not a quality issue at first glance.
Exactly. That's why it's tricky. It's not that the content is bad, it's that it doesn't feel connected anymore. And over time, that weakens how people recognize and remember the brand.
A lot of people point to AI as the reason for this. Do you think AI is causing the problem?
I'd say AI is revealing the problem, not causing it. Most brands already had loosely defined voice and messaging. AI just exposes those gaps because it requires clearer inputs to produce consistent outputs. Traditional brand guidelines often describe tone or values, but they don't define how to make decisions in different contexts. And that's exactly what AI needs. Not just instructions, but judgment.
Another thing we hear often is that AI generated content sounds generic. Why does that happen?
Because AI is trained on patterns, it learns from existing data. So it naturally leans toward language that is familiar, widely used, and safe. That means it produces content that is technically correct and well structured, but often lacks a distinct point of view.
So it's optimized for correctness, not character.
Exactly. And without strong guidance, that leads to content that feels polished but forgettable.
Many teams try to fix this by writing better prompts. Does that approach work?
It helps, but only to a certain extent. You can improve output quality with more detailed prompts, examples, and instructions, but eventually you hit a limit. That's because brand alignment isn't just about how something is written, it's about how decisions are made. Prompts can guide language, but they can't fully capture judgment, nuance, or context.
So the problem is deeper than wording.
Exactly. Brand fluency is not just a writing style, it's an operating system.
So what does it actually mean to teach AI to speak brand?
It means defining how your brand thinks, not just how it sounds. You need to clarify your point of view, your priorities, your boundaries, and the trade offs you're willing to make. For example, what kind of complexity are you comfortable with? Where do you simplify? What tone do you avoid, even if it performs well?
So you're encoding decision making into the system.
Exactly. And when those inputs are clear, the output becomes far more consistent and recognizable.
There's also a shift happening from content creation to decision making. How do you see that evolving?
The most advanced teams are no longer using AI just to generate content faster. They're using it to support decisions, like when to communicate, how to position a message, or how much detail is appropriate for a specific audience. These are brand decisions, and when AI is trained with the right context, it can help scale those decisions across channels.
So AI becomes more of a collaborator.
Exactly. Not replacing human thinking, but extending it.
Why is this becoming more critical now?
Because AI systems are becoming more autonomous. They're starting to trigger messages, respond to users, and optimize journeys in real time. At that point, they're not just generating content, they're actively representing your brand.
So misalignment becomes more serious.
Exactly. It's no longer just a messaging issue, it becomes an operational risk.
That brings us to trust. How do teams build trust in AI driven systems?
Trust comes from clarity and consistency. If your brand logic is clearly defined and embedded into your systems, you can trust the outputs and decisions being made. But if that foundation is weak, no amount of prompting will create reliable results.
So trust is built through structure.
Exactly. It's about embedding judgment, not just generating content.
Looking ahead, what will truly differentiate brands in an AI driven world?
Clarity of voice and consistency of expression. When everyone can produce content at scale, the brands that stand out will be the ones that feel unmistakably themselves. Not louder, not more frequent, just clearer and more recognizable.
So identity becomes the real advantage.
Exactly.
This doesn't sound like a technology problem.
It's not. This is leadership work. It requires clarity on what the brand stands for, how it communicates, and where it draws boundaries. AI doesn't weaken brand, it stress tests it. And teams that go through this process come out stronger and more aligned internally.
Let's close with one key takeaway.
Scaling content is no longer the advantage, scaling clarity is. If your systems can produce content that consistently reflects your brand, that's where real differentiation comes from.
That's a powerful way to end. Growth today isn't about how much you produce, it's about whether what you produce feels unmistakably yours. Thanks, Akanksha, for such a thoughtful and insightful conversation.
Thanks, Abeer. This was great.
And to our listeners, as you scale with AI, don't just optimize for speed. Make sure your systems are learning to sound like you. We'll be back soon. Until then, keep building with clarity.